I think we lose the fact that we've got to build some type of relationship with people. What is the goal of the store? What are you trying to really accomplish here? We just have to get some coaches in these dealers because these guys.
Are you wasting your time and money on inefficiencies in the business? Are sales down and lead conversion rates are low? Are you having problems building or maintaining inventory levels? What does it really take to win in the automotive industry?
Get the cars that make sense for your store rather than just wishing at an auction, so it gives you that better control.
With over 25 years of experience, Darrell Steed isn't just another industry voice. He's the guy who's out there solving real problems for dealers just like you.
They'll even say in the Pacific Northwest where you're at that it's a tougher market. It's tougher to find cars. The market's a little bit softer, and in the midst of all this, your turn doubled and your profit's up 75%.
Yes.
The truth hurts only when it should. Are you ready to hear the truths? Darrell is here to unpack the hard truths and the proven strategies that will take your dealership from struggling to soaring. And he is taking it all in the streets, with real talk, open dialogue, unfiltered conversations. This is the podcast series, Street Smarts, powered by Smartwolf Consulting.
Good morning, everybody. You guys in the West Coast, welcome to Street Smarts. I'm your host, Darrell Steed, and we are here with somebody that, I'll be 100% honest, I'll be doing about 40 or 50 of these podcasts, and I do not believe we're going to find someone better than this. We have probably heard in our life many of times that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, guys. But we actually have a real life one here on the show, and we're actually going to talk about the experience, both in the auto industry, but we're really going to bring it back home to what we do and why we do it. Because at the end of the day, we do it for the people we love and for our communities. And I can't tell you guys, obviously, how excited I am, but we have Timothy Glover, and we're about to have a conversation with the one and only Dash Gordon. And when you guys are done with this, there'll be links in here that you guys need to check out. It's not every day that you see somebody take an adventure that starts out as something innocent, turns it into something epic, and now is going worldwide. But we're going to have a conversation with Tim. Tim, thank you so much for being here. And I know that we're smiling a little bit, but I really, truly believe that you are the everyday hero, not the Batman, the Robin, the stuff we see in the movies, but the hero we see every day. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you just about experience, life, and then how we can help dealers just in the real world. Well, first off, let's talk about the most important thing. Like, how's life going? Where are you winning? And then tell us a little bit about what you do, both work and obviously in your personal life, because we really hone down on experience and taking care of people and just people in general. So tell us where you're winning, what drives you, and then what you're doing with Dash Gordon as well.
Well, I think drive is just something that you're born with. I don't think it's something that you can teach. There's a lot of things that you can teach out there, but if you can have a winner's attitude, but if you don't have the drive to see it through every single day, then that can become a real problem. And I think a lot of people just don't understand how that whole thing works. And so people tell me every day, man, you go. That's because I have goals that I want to hit, and I'm driven to make sure that I achieve those goals, every single day. I spent 32 years in automotive retail, and, from the day that I got in to the day that I left, every single day that I worked in the automotive industry, it was always a challenge, but I was willing to accept those challenges. And I just wanted to persevere. Every day I went to work, I always went excited. I was always, enthusiastic. I was always pumped up. But I was driven at the end of the day to make sure that we met sales quotas and make sure that we hit all of our goals every single month. And I think that's the way you have to approach life as well. I'm a senior client trainer for Cox Automotive, and I've been working on the ICO side now for 6 years. And another situation where your day-to-day business can get a little methodical at times, and sometimes almost kind of create some boredom for you. So you have to find other avenues and other ways to keep yourself motivated, especially working from home, and, make sure that every day you put your best foot forward, your best effort forward to help dealers succeed, but also so that you feel like you've achieved some success as well throughout the day.
Makes sense. And where would you say, right now, because we'll dive into the Dash stuff in a minute, because I think people really need to understand what you do and why it's so important. But where do you see the biggest challenge right now, whether it be life, job, combination of both, that you have to not struggle, but that you have to kind of grind through every day? Where's the biggest challenge?
Man, I think it's just adjusting to life overall. I mean, I think, I'm going to be 60 years old next year. And I think what I've seen in my existence has been nothing more than magical, but at times a struggle with all the technology and so many things and so many moving parts. And, who would have ever thought that we'd ever become in a lockdown for COVID and we'd be wearing masks on our face and, overcoming, that obstacle and seeing people that we, loved and knew, dying and things like that. It was just a crazy time. So what I think that's done is, I think COVID and the way the world is working now, it's sped everything up. And I think just normal human nature is it's hard to catch up. We've sat back so long. We say things like, we're just old school. That's just how we do it. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't work anymore. You can't just say, I'm old school, because it's not like you're old school and you can go buy a vinyl record and put it on your record player and play it, or put your CD into your CD player that manufacturers don't even make anymore. You have to evolutionize as the rest of the world evolutionizes as well. And I think people struggle with that. And I think the biggest struggle right now is just the world in general. Like, where's your place? How do you expand? How do you grow? It's the challenges are every single day. I mean, it's a crazy world out there. And now more than ever, there's not really a lot of consistency. So you have to be able to find a path that you can stay consistent with, but you've got to be able to pivot left. You got to be able to pivot right. I mean, you don't really get a choice.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too, right? Because, I really focus on the experience and connection, right? We always talk about, I love when you're saying like, oh, that's just how we do it. We're old school. This is how, it's always been. And when you really think about that, you're like, if it is how it's always been and it's been successful, why haven't you done anything better than you've done before? and then why are you surprised by the fact that we're doing the exact same numbers, or you're struggling through business? Could it be, just spitballing here, could it be that maybe we aren't really focusing in on some of the other things that are more important, like experience and connection? Like for me in the industry, and obviously us working in the same climate, and then now I'm out doing a different version of this, is it's all about that experience, connecting with your customer and creating that dynamic, because the results, I think, are kind of easily assessed. Everyone says like, well, if you're not selling cars and you're not buying cars, you're not. Well, that's because you're only looking at the result. You're not looking at the 5 pieces it takes to get that result. And I think the first one is experience and connection. I'd love to hear how, one, what you're seeing in the automotive industry, 2, what you just see, like you do something very unique. And that's why I wanted to tie this in is, with you being Dash Gordon and the foundations and the things you serve, I mean, your whole preface there is connection and experience, like giving people that connection, the ability, the belief, and someone believing in them. But isn't that the exact same thing we should be doing in the industry as well?
I agree, Darrell. I think that what we've done is, and it's even how Dash Gordon kind of happened. I think we lose the fact that we've got to build some type of relationship with people. It's not, even though we live in technology and we've computers and phones and all this other kind of stuff, I think that the conversation and building relationship, I think this new group that's coming along into the world, it's hard. It's hard for them to communicate. They're on their phones all day long. They're communicating with their phone. They're sitting in front of video games. They're sitting in front of the television. They're not really connecting with people. They're just connecting with devices. So then when you get put into a spot where you actually have to talk to somebody, or you have to build some type of relationship with somebody, you don't really know how to do it. I think that's in the automotive industry. I think that's a piece of the puzzle that robotics and online and all of those things will never be able to duplicate, because at the end of the day, I get frustrated, if I call the bank or whatever, and I got to go through this whole automated process. I just want to talk to somebody. I just want to talk to somebody. I don't want to talk to the computer. I just want to talk to somebody. And, you got the chat bots and all that stuff, and you put in a question and then you end up having to talk to somebody because the chat bot can't answer it. I just think that we've just become so watered down in the sales industry. It just, level of communication has just changed. You got to worry about hurting people's feelings and saying always the perfect thing, so nobody gets offended. I mean, it's just wild. You just can't just have normal human interaction and just shoot it out there like it needs to be done. And it's gray or white. I mean, that's it. It's black or white. There's no in between.
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing, right? When we're talking about experience or connection, right? And let's just use the pandemic, because I think when we talk about, you brought it up that it like supercharged everything or made everything faster. Yeah. I think it's the exact same thing, is that in the automotive industry, at least, right? We look at this and, let's go back 10 years, 20 years. And it was like, you had some skill sets. Like you said, you either have drive or you don't. Well, there are salespeople that had like the gift of gab, or they didn't, right? Like they had these unique things and you couldn't teach it. You could teach someone a process, but if they had that, they could do it. Well, then COVID came along, and I think it kind of ruined even a bit of those people, or made them inherently lazy. One or the other, is because you didn't need anything. It was, I have the car, sign here, press hard. There was no more conversation. There was no more dialect. There was no more connection. It was, we have it, you want it, this is how it is, rather than being more conversational, connecting with your audience, creating an experience. I mean, I saw stores that experience was, they didn't care. They didn't care about CSI. They didn't care about experience. They didn't, because they were like, why would I? I'm charged over MSRP. I'm getting, first time ever in history, since you and I have both been alive, and then our parents been alive, used cars went up in value. Every car actually appreciated in value. So you have a depreciative asset that now magically goes the other way.
Correct.
So, then COVID's over, and we take our masks off, and we decide we're going to like be humans again. And the problem is we forgot, like, how quickly in a year and a half's time, because I think that's probably the time frame that it was truly like oddly weird, not the start of it and the end of it, but where it's like we're locked down, we don't engage, we don't do all these things, is we forgot how to actually talk to people, how to do this. We have the AIs that people want to do that, which I agree with you. Calling a bank and having to deal with that, I'll be 100% honest. I mean, I'm a few years away from having no hair like you, because just that alone makes me want to rip it all out. Because even when you say something to them, they don't even understand it. And then you're like this, you spell it out for them, they don't get it. So what I think is interesting when we talk about that is, now you have these people that don't know how to sell, or that the gift of gab, all these things. Let's say there was 5% of those people out there.
Right.
Now it's 2, 1, like, and so now we're, and I think this is where that experience becomes kind of unique, is think yourself as a manager, GM, GSM, sales manager, whatever executive that you are within your organization. How many of you guys have went and got training? How many of you guys have went and got any type of training, education, webinar, anything, right? To talk to, 1, the millennial, 2, Generation Z, which is now the generation coming in, and 3, understanding the now new pathways. Like you said, we have for lack of a better term, much more sensitive culture now.
We do.
I mean, it's phrased in many different ways, but we'll say more sensitive. And how do you then talk to people, engage with people, and more importantly, connect with these? If you don't get any training, if you don't look at this is how we've always done it. Well, I know how I was trained in the auto industry, and it was, you go out and do it, baptism by fire, and just what it was. And you kind of learned by failing all the time.
That's true.
It was kind of like you said, you either had that drive to win or you didn't, because there was a lot of people that I think would have been fantastic in the auto industry, but there was no training, there was no engagement, so when they went out there, they didn't have that drive. Like you said, they didn't, like, when you keep beating someone down and you keep knocking them down, it's hard for people to take that.
It is. I mean,
and there's people that can do it, and then there's people that can't. So what I would think is interesting, what do you see, like, when you're talking to dealers, you go see dealers, and I know you work with groups, you work with individual or independent dealers, but what do you see in that is, like, do you see people making that shift to understanding experience is important or connection? Or do you see that they're looking for the new toy or the new hot thing that's going to magically do it for them?
So here's what I think. COVID hits. this was the biggest opportunity for the automotive industry to do a complete reset. Complete reset. And when I mean reset, be able to, they got greedy, but be able to reset in such a way that customers would go buy cars from dealerships of choice, and dealers could hold MSRP on everything, still make record profits, but hone in on what's just kind of happened. Hey, you know what? We've been charging over and over. Let's just set to MSRP and there's so many customers. Let's allow customers to buy from the dealers that they just want to buy from. But what did they do? They went right back to what they were doing pre-COVID. They just same thing, desking and 5,000 behind invoice and all this other kind of crazy stuff. And it was just they went back and so now what I see is dealers just reverting back to what they were doing pre-COVID. It's not they had a great opportunity to change the way the whole world buys cars, but they said, hey, we're just old school. Let's go back to the way we were doing it. And they think that works. Thousands of dollars in the front end. And of course, fixed ops and parts and services really where all your money's at. You're hoping that you make just to sell, all of these cars. And really the only manufacturer out there right now that's managing the day's supply better than anybody is just Toyota.
I was about to say Toyota's kind of like they figured it out, right?
They figured it out. They said, look, man, we're going to keep it at like a 20, 25 day supply. And there's going to be a want, there's going to be a need, and we're going to keep the people frothing at the mouth because we're not going to flood the dealers with inventory anymore. We figured it out. But Hyundai and Chevy, they just go back to doing things. So let's just keep producing. Now cars are sitting on dealers' lots and dealers are trying to find a way to get rid of them. And floor plan interest is higher than it's ever been before. So they didn't learn. They didn't learn. And dealers are reluctant at the end of the day. Your GMs, your sales managers, your GSMs, the majority are reluctant to really learn, to really be taught. And it's just like with the process that I teach. I tell them all the time, it's a real first grade approach. I mean, this is not anything that's real difficult. I could teach this to a 9-year-old, and if you just follow it, guess what? You're going to get a lollipop at the end of the day, and you're going to be good to go. But no, they don't want to do that. They don't want to do it that way. They want to try to reinvent the wheel. And I have to be very blunt with dealers and say, look, if you fail, and I mean you miserably fail, know this: the egg is not on my face. It's not on Support's face. It's not on the product of Kelley Blue Book. It's not on Cox Automotive. It's just internally, you just don't know how to do things the right way. That's it.
It's funny you say that because, right, like everyone would be like, when they hear that, they'll be like, well, it's just, and they'll make their own version, right, of what they need to accept, which is fine, right? Like as Smartwolf's motto is, the truth hurts only when it should. Well, if that stung, then part of that was the truth because you believe it a little bit. So, but needless to say, is what I think is interesting. You talked about like process. Is I was on a phone call and then I covered this on a webinar, and oddly enough, it was process actually is relatively easy. It's black, white. So I think people kind of get these things confused. Is they're like, well, we kind of do this, we kind of do that. No, that's a guideline. That's a guideline. We kind of do something like we kind of take care of our people. We kind of do. That's a guideline. Like treat people well. That's a guideline. That's not a process. Right. Processes are we start here, we end here, and it happens every single time. There's no gray area. It's like you said, you teach them this thing. And as we both have done that before, and now I've expanded on it and I have even more stuff for it, is my 8-year-old goes through all the training that I do. And if he can't understand it, I redo it. My 13-year-old, I can tell you right now, will take down a car in an inspection process in 8 minutes. Like he will, and he does it by the steps, right? And so it's the consistency, right? You deliver a process. The process is easy. It's not like you sat there and gave them something where you're like, okay, you need to learn 6 languages and you need to do this and to do this. No, this is very vanilla. It's very easy. Right. And then there is elaborations to it, which is like what I do. So you understand the whys. But like when you get the core thing, it's like, here you guys go. It's like the starter set. Mm-hmm. Now all you have to do is every time. Just do it every time. And if you do it every time, like you said, guess what? Bling, you get the shiny lollipop, right? Like it's pretty simple. However, I think what you see is the one thing that is consistent about dealers is inconsistency.
That's the most consistent.
I mean, they are 100% consistent to inconsistent. And here's the reason why. Is like you brought it up, and I was actually at Used Car Palooza, and I did this challenge, and it was very awesome because I did not expect it to go like this, but then it just like happened to work this way. I said, hey guys, we're at the end of this thing. So we've got Glenn Lundy, myself, Frank Knox. We have these like real power players talking about used car operations. And I'm probably like the minnow, because I'm in there with like guys that have been doing this for 40 years that have like created max offer, guys that have created the 800% thing. We've got David Spizak, who, like, if you want data,
yeah, you got some heavy hitters.
Yeah, like this is like your data king. This guy will give it to you, and there's no way you can ignore it. It's just It's right in your face. So I get in there, and I'm the experienced guy. Like, let's go ahead and have a conversation of how you put it all together. Like, here's all you got. You got all these things going on. How do you make it to where the customer feels like they're getting red carpet service, right? Because that's really where I live, and that's how I get the results for these buying centers. And I say, hey, everyone, raise your hand in here. And there's 95 to 100 people in there. How many of you guys have one of us? And there's 5 of us, and we're on a panel on retainer in your store, in like as a coach, a consultant, whatever it is. One person raised their hand. And I was like, interesting. So you're here wanting to learn about how to get better in used cars or used operations or acquisition or some piece of it. And so you're looking to get coached, but you don't have anyone in your store to coach you continuously or your people. Mm-hmm. So, but do you tell your people every single day that they need to do their training, they need to do their product training, they need to get better? I mean, at what point do we say like, wow, I'm like a walking case of hypocrisy? Right. Like, you're not raising the law of the lid. And I really believe on that, right? Like, I have that drive. Like, I tell people all the time, I will catch up on all the sleep I'm not getting right when they put me in the ground. Okay. I promise you, I'm going to get all the sleep that I didn't get when I'm dead. Right. I have that drive because I don't want to fail. I know I'm going to have failures. I just don't, like, I'm just going to keep driving through it. Is if you're not trying to get better. So if I'm a 5, and then I tell my people, you guys need to be 9s. How do they get to a 9 if I'm a 5? Like, if you're not raising your lid, how do you get your people to hear? You're suppressing them. Correct. So I kind of challenged them with, if you don't know, and I got to work for 2 people that were godsends, that were very much about, I want to show you how to be a GM. And then I got to work for a GM and owner that said, I'm going to hire people that are really passionate and good at what you do. And then they're going to manage that person rather than trying to micromanage the business. But what they did is they said, okay, they brought those people in and then wanted to learn from them. Why do you do this? How do you do it? So they were very open and receptive of, so when internet came out or multi-level marketing, they were like, yeah, I know how to do cars, but like, I've never understood why we do these tiered marketings. So then when you show them, they're like, oh, okay. Oddly enough, what did they do? They empowered you to be good at what you were at rather than trying to do 10 jobs, right? So what I think is interesting is when we're looking at that is if, let's say you have trouble with consistency, let's say you have trouble with process, because that's where it all starts. Mm-hmm. You can get anything you want. Any software out there is great in the right situation. They're not for everybody, but everything serves the purpose. But if you don't have a process and consistency,
the software is not going to work anyway.
But when you look at that, is like, why don't you bring in like an efficiency expert or a process person, like, so that they can show you, because you might not know, right? The fear of the unknown, right? Is I don't know how to do that. I've never done that, because we do have that. This is how we've always done it. Well, let me ask you, we go back and we always parallel this is, I'm just curious, when the Model T came out, good old Henry Ford put that Model T out. Did we call people on the phone and tell them we had cars?
No.
Okay, well, let's go a little bit further. Maybe that's too old and that won't translate to anyone young watching this. Okay, what about like in the 80s? We had this really cool thing called a fax machine. Yeah. And this is how we communicated with banks. And if you still have one, I apologize. I just dated you, because yes, those things are old. But now how do we communicate with banks? And then we can talk about all the GMs that said the internet was the devil in Y2K and it was going to ruin the business. And of course, the data shows since the internet came out for the auto industry, we've sold more cars than we've ever could have thought of. Right. So when you look at that, is we've evolved, but it's been forced contrition, essentially, like you have to accept it. And I bring this up only for this reason, so that we can kind of parallel to used cars. Is I opened the first buying center, acquisition strategy, private party acquisition, whatever people want to dub the keyword, in 2010. And then by 2011, had that thing like just mowing through the industry and buying 200 plus cars out of one point in Fresno, California. We're talking a itty bitty tiny city in the scheme of things, trying to compete with the San Jose's, the LA's, and everything else. We're in 2024, and the word buying center is now some kind of new word. Like it's like a hot phrase. Like they're like, man, do you have a buying center? It's like a shiny toy. And I'm like,
it is.
Guys, 14 years later, you've been doing it with ICO, and so in a version of like, starting that for many years. I was there for 7 before I did this, and it's, guys, this isn't new, but this is the industry. We're 14 years into this, and we're just now willing to accept that there may be a different way we can do things.
That's crazy.
So when we talk about that and the lack of adaptation, right, and being able to adopt something new, like in the used car segment, we know that there's many constraints. I mean, we're dealing with all kinds of things. You take COVID, now we have compression. So even if you were really good at buying, what you have to pay to what you're selling them for is tighter than it ever was, because guess what? You made all your money when you sold it for God knows how much.
Correct.
And there's a lack of inventory because there's some manufacturers that are keeping their inventory tight. And then there's some that, like you said, that are decided, nope, we're going to overproduce all of this. And so we got to sell it. So with used cars, where do you see, like when it comes to acquisition, whether it be the ICOs, the private party auctions, things like that, where is the dealer best served? Like where are they best served when it comes to experience, both for their staff and the outside world? Like how do they get better in that area?
I think we just have to get some coaches in these dealers, because these guys, they just, so on a daily basis, I'll look at the dealer's look to book, and I'll go in there and I'll check out this look to book, and they're trading for ICOs at 78%, 82% cost to market, but then their inventory, they're not using ICO. They're trying to capture vehicles at 62% and 64% because their perception is, well, by the time I get it through service and by the time I add pack and I can't make a profit. Darrell, that's such a hard question, because I don't know. Wow, man. That's what I struggle with every day with dealers is I don't think they really know. I think that what dealers do is just, there's some that get it. I think they just ride it, and they're just, they're on the track. And what happens is it starts to get like a freight train on a dirt road, and it's skidding all over the place, and they're looking for help, but they don't really know where to I don't know. I think that the used car industry in general has always been a mystery for dealers across the board. Dealers, there's some that figure it out, but they're very few. Most of them are just, it's just an everyday thing. They're trying to trade for cars, and they're trying to get them for the right price, and they're trying to sell them, and I don't know. I've always thought used cars is messy.
And it's funny you say that, because it is, right? If you actually think about it, right, used cars is the only piece of the business that touches every part of the business.
Yes.
So when you think about that, like now common sense, we both know that that's not as common as one might think, but common sense would prevail and say, well, man, if used cars touches every part of my business and is a profit piece for every part of my business, I should get really good at this.
Right.
That's the easy thought. You're like, why wouldn't you want to hone in on this? Now, guys, as we're talking here, I don't want anyone to take offense to the fact that is the pipe dream to think that that's just going to magically happen, because used cars are hard. They are messy. There's so many moving parts. But when we're talking about used car acquisition, I had Frank Knox on. He is very good. He has a very unique strategy for the auctions. And I prescribe that auctions are necessary as a piece of your acquisition strategy. But for most dealers that I talk to, it's 65, 70%. That's where they get their inventory. And then the other part is trades. They rarely have a private party. Almost none of them have a service drive operation.
Correct.
And so when you look at that, it's like, okay, so if used cars are messy, and the biggest excuse I hear, or the biggest, we'll call it objection, because of gosh, that word excuse, it's so offensive to people, but objection is, well, it's too hard to buy cars from private party. Well, okay, let's explore this for a minute. How easy is it to buy a car and be profitable from the auction today? Because if you're buying slews of cars that are magically profitable for you after your packs and everything else and all that stuff, don't tell anybody. Keep that secret to yourself, because you're one of very few. I mean, 1 in 100 tops.
Right.
However, we know, I mean, we see all the industry stuff. I mean, you see it with Cox. I see it for either Cox or cars.com. I mean, I get all these insight reports, and you look at it and it says, here's what the average thing is selling for. Here's what they're like. So you can see the compression. Like there is, like, you can't lie about what the market's actually doing. And it's like, what if you created an experience where people came in and you bought the car $1,000, $2,000, you know, tops, less than the auction, no transport fees, no auction fees, no PSI fees, which is the post-sale inspection. And then you actually get to see the car and you have control of what it looks like the whole experience. I'm curious, how many dealers want to have control over their store? I don't know any of them that don't want full control.
That's correct.
But right now we're very reactive because we're like, well, we need cars, right? They sell some, they have a big weekend, we got to go get cars. So they go to the auction, and now you're forced to buy stuff because you're like, I need inventory. I can't be empty. And if you're not taking enough trades, like you said, if you're trying to take in trades, and we'll use vAuto, that's a great mechanism. Yes, there's other tools out there, but vAuto is widely accepted as probably the primary one. It's vAuto. You look at it and you're trying to take trades in at 62 or 70% of market. I can all but guarantee, and I'll be the first person, please contact me, be a guest and prove me wrong. And listen, I'll eat humble pie on the show, is that you can do that effectively at large scale. Maybe you get 1 or 2 or 3 because somebody hasn't got online, they didn't do any research, or you have the car they really want. We're not going to talk about the exceptions to the rule. Let's talk about the rule. You try to do that, you're creating an experience to where not only do you lose that deal, the opportunity for that deal, but you also lose that customer.
Sure.
Because that customer's going somewhere else. So then you think about it as like, when you do that, what are you doing to your 3-year plan? Right. Like when in rotation, what are you doing to your service? Because you took that option out of even being able to service the car. There's all these moving parts to use.
You're depleting it over time.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, it's, you know, when we're talking about used acquisition, is like, and you say like they need coaches. Well, I mean, yes, I love hearing that. That's essentially what I am. I'm an efficiency expert, a coach, a consultant. What you see in the background, actually, you're the first one to see this, by the way, Tim, this background. Cool. Street Smarts is now giving dealers 2 different ways. I have no problem to say, if you want me in person, it takes a lot of time. I put a lot of time in there. I don't build buying centers that don't make money, but it's all based on experience, which then brings the results. But people kept telling me the same thing you said. Well, it's either too much. I don't have time. They don't know where to start. Well, I created some things that, like, now there's a web academy coming out. So it is the basics of everything you need to know, everything I teach in the first 60 days. So that if you're like, hey, I can't afford to have you in person, here's an affordable way. Right. I've now created a mastermind group, right? That if you want to learn, like you're a GSM, just got promoted to GM, but maybe you don't know as much as you want to know. You can then become a member of this mastermind group. We're covering core subjects, real processes, real deliverables, real things you can put in place so that you can learn without doing 2 things. 1, getting fired because you don't know enough to keep that job, right? Or 2, you want to empower yourself so that you can actually run the store without making mistakes that cost your store money. Because if it costs them money, it probably costs you money. So it's probably better to get better. But people always ask, they're like, well, it takes a lot of time and effort. I was like, when's the last time you went to the auction and tried to buy cars?
Yeah.
I just put 200 cars in yesterday for a client, and we went through, and we were lucky, guys. We got crazy. It got crazy. Okay. We bought 7. Okay. 7 that there will actually be profitable. 200 cars, had to sit there and look at all 2. So you're like, how many hours did it take to book all those cars, to break them out, to make sure you knew exactly what the money was, then to go through the auction? By the way, it was 4 hours of looking at an auction. Watching every car come through because you had to watch them, right? You had to be ready for them. And then you get 7 cars. So you ask yourself, how much work does it take if you did that every day? Right. So when you look at it, it takes work to buy cars no matter where you go. But if it comes to your store, now you have a customer there. Now you have the potential, maybe they want to trade it in. We do know, all the industry insights say 65 to 70% of the time, someone's not just selling their car, they're replacing it with something. Well, if they're at your store, maybe that's an opportunity for a sale as well, right? 2 for 1. So when we're talking about those used cars, and like you deal with ICO, and you deal with it with a lot of different stores, like when they need that, or they're like, hey, I want to start there. like, where is a good place for them to start? Is it to start researching? Is it to reach out? Is it to, if they get ICO, is it to crawl, walk, run, which we always profess to, like, you got to start, like, where do they start? Is it just the conversation? Where do you think it's a good place for a dealer to start? Not like getting coaches and everything else, because that's obviously a place, but if they haven't thought of that, right? Where's someone where they just start so they can create that better experience, both for their staff and for their clientele, so that they can grow their business for the future?
Well, I think at that point, I mean, you got to try to find out what you want to know from a dealer standpoint is what is the goal of the store? What are you trying to really accomplish here? Once I think you've tried to find out what they are trying to accomplish, I think then you got to kind of reel them in a little bit and say, you said crawl, walk, run. I just like to say, look, let's do it slowly, because what we want to do is we want to build it long term. We don't want to build it short term. Could you see some early success quickly? You could. But don't let that be the measurement, because it could be short-lived. But if we take this thing 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time, and we continue to build it, and you just let me guide you, then what we'll do is when we get to our 90-day, maybe even 120-day window, we'll have some consistency. We'll understand the market, your area, how your customers react. We'll have a good roadmap of how to make this thing succeed. Let's buy 2 or 3 the first month. 2 or 3. Yeah, just 2 or 3. I know, but I'm getting 200. No, I know you're getting 200, but let's buy 2 or 3. Then the next month, let's set the expectation that we do 3 times what you do the first month. So now we buy 9. Then when we get to our 90-day window, maybe even our 120-day window, guess what? Let's do 4 to 5 times that. Once we break the 20 barrier, there's going to be no looking back. Because now what we'll have is we'll have a process in place that got us to the 20, and now we can just build on that. We're going to still do everything the same, but now what we're going to do is we're going to buy more cars. Why are we going to buy more cars? Because we're better than we were 120 days ago. So now we can move it.
You know what? So I'm glad that you said it like that, right? It's like you have to really have that conversation of like, where do you want to be? The biggest conversation I have, I get requests all the time. And, and it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, guys, we need to slow it down a little bit, because they're like, hey, Darrell, I heard that you're helping this store. You're doing this, you're doing that. And they're like, I want to hire you. Like, I want to buy 100 cars a month. And I only ask them one question. I'm like, sounds great. I'll ask them 2 questions. One's about obviously how do they want to take care of the payment, but the second one is before we get to that, because there's no point in asking for money or closing a deal if they're not prepared, right? Because it just creates sour grapes. Is, okay, we buy 100 cars this month. We buy 30 the first week, 30 the second week, 20. How many techs do you have? How does this affect your service department? If we put 30 cars right now in 3 days into your service department, what does it do?
Right.
What about your merchandising? What about your advertising? Oh, you have a package right now to advertise 20 cars on cars.com, Auto Trader, all the sources, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, okay, but now you want to carry 120. All right, so we can't wait till we get there. We have to prepare for what we're doing so that when it happens, we're not sitting there behind the time. So, and they go, so like, oh yeah, like, yeah, if we bought 100 cars, there's no way our service will be able to handle it. Okay, great. Let's talk about hundreds our goal. Maybe we're 6 months from that. What if we just got to 15 this month, or 10? Like, that's 10 cars you didn't have before. And then, like you said, but you have to have that. And I think that in lies the first question, right? Is it consistency? It lies into okay, this is long-term. Like, if you're going to turn something on, or you're going to say we're building something, or we're going to take a different shift, I personally think the word try is one of the stupidest words in the English language.
Right. Because
it builds in failure. But if you don't try it, you don't like, oh, we're going to kind of do it. No, it's like, you're doing this. This is now part of your business model, because it'll do more harm to you tickling at it or playing with it for 90 days and then like not doing it, because people will be like, oh yeah, we kind of used to do that, but it didn't work. Right. I don't know anything that I kind of used to do that ever worked. So, I mean, listen, and that's just me. But, when we think about that, it really comes down to that, like, understanding that experience, look at some options, right? Reach out to people. But I would be the first one to say too, don't be afraid to ask, industry people or help of like, hey, like, where can I get somebody, or where, like, who can help me with this? Because at the end of the day, if you've never done private party acquisition or, lead providers, I like KBB ICO. I think people misuse it a lot because they treat it like a sales lead. And I'm like, it's not a sales lead. Even if it's
Correct.
a treatment lead, it's not a sales lead. And if you treat it like that, you're going to see the same up and down inconsistent results you do with your sales leads.
Correct.
However, it's like, find somebody that's like, hey, can they help you? Right. And by the way, help's never free. Right. If someone's good at something, it always costs something. But, like, I just opened a buying center. We're a year into this one, and they just off private party and ICO, just those two tools. That's all they have. $2.7 million in additional gross revenue to the store.
That's amazing.
We don't count their trades. We don't do that. Like, so you look at it and you go like this, and so then I ask dealers, and everyone that's in this, I'd love it when we post this, go ahead and put it in the comments. We'll see what people say, after this goes to post. How much money would you expense to drive in $2.7 million of additional revenue to your used front end, back end, everything? How much money expense would be okay? Or how much would you guys be all right with to bring that type of money into your store? I'm just curious. So when you guys see this, put that in the notes, the post, the comments, because I'd be really interested to see. I've had one dealer tell me a number that I thought was absurd and like as a operating budget. And then I've had people say numbers that I'm like, okay, now be serious. What's the real number? So I'd just be curious to see when people interact with this. But I want to shift gears because obviously we've got a few minutes left, but I want to shift gears a little bit out of the auto industry, because you do something that I think people have to know about, but it really does kind of go into experience. I have watched every clip from newsreels to videos to when you go lives. Even when you're not live, I'm hitting them after you're done because maybe I'm doing something. But with Dash Gordon, what I think is interesting, because it kind of plays into what auto industries can do. When you said you could have changed the industry, you could have changed in COVID. Like, you could have literally revolutionized stuff with one decision. And I think you did that in your personal life, which obviously has now grown to something that I don't think anyone would have ever thought. And now I'm glad it is that you decided to do something to make some money for vacation. And it grew to being something that might be one of the most rewarding things I think you probably have going on in your life is with Dash Gordon. Share with the audience a little bit about what Dash Gordon does, and then what it has done to the community, like what you've seen it do.
So, what Dash Gordon does is, the mission statement's clear. I stimulate and build awareness in special needs, disabilities, and all at-risk communities. It's a very underserviced group of people. I don't think they get their just. I think they get everything half-filled. When they put on an event or they do something special, it's just treated differently. It doesn't get the same notoriety as people without disabilities or special needs. And I've never met a group of people that I've worked with that show so much love and so much compassion and so much happiness on a daily basis that it can internally change the person that you are daily. And you just have to be accepting of that. So what I'm doing is I'm now putting these young adults and older adults in the forefront. Dash Gordon is in the back, just driving them and giving them a bigger voice in the community so they can be seen, so they can be heard, so that the community can see that they bring a lot of value to the world. They've been dealt a disability, but they've been dealt an ability that most of us can never even do or achieve ourselves. And we don't even realize that because we don't give them a shot. And we saw that this past Friday night. We had the Night to Remember pageant, and we had, of the 31 contestants, 28 of them did talent. And I think 722 people attended this thing with standing room only. And I think everybody was really unbelievably wowed. Like, what did we just witness? Well, what you witnessed was greatness in people that you never thought had this. And so now they're experiencing something. People are starting to experience something completely new, because what we're doing is we're not putting it in front of 50 people. We're not putting it in front of 100 people. We're putting it in front of 700, 800 people. We're packing these venues so that people can experience and see the greatness that these individuals bring to the world. And you know, I'm not taking this on any kind of religious swing, but you know, I when I stand before my maker, and I'm gonna be real blunt with him, be like, you know, what was this all about down there? But I didn't know. I thought that when I would die would be the first time I would meet an actual angel. I didn't know that I would get to work with him every day.
I think that's really good to say. Like, not only good to say, but understanding like that feeling, right? That passion of like the experience. Because like a lot of people would say, like, okay, do they think there's an angle in this? That you always have the cynics, right?
Sure.
I know that it's not, because when I've seen, like, you see the gentleman, and I can't remember all of their names because like you've literally influenced a lot of people, but we've got DJ Cowboy Red. We've got the gentleman who wrote the song that with Trey, that the country star, and then you've got that young lady, the previous pageant winner. She was absolutely phenomenal. She went and did some kind of red carpet thing or something.
She walked on the runway in New York City Fashion Week and was the first person in the history of Fashion Week to walk with a disability.
And when you think about that, and this is where I tie it into dealerships, right? Is like, think about what you could be doing, right? And the reason I started with this, you guys, so you understand, is that saying that Tim's a hero in ways that we don't think, right? And I make the joke of he's not the Batman or the Superman or the stuff like the Marvel characters, which, I mean, let's get real. I'm sure that Tim would like to know how to fly, okay, and have X-ray vision. Who doesn't want these really cool features, right? But when I say hero, it's the ones like, you know, like you'll hear people say like, my dad's my hero, which is just, it's admirable, right? But he is putting a light, right? He's putting an idea in place of everyone matters, not just the people we think matter. And then he's given this empowerment to these people in his community, right? And if, like, obviously if he had the bandwidth, it's going to continue to grow. Sure. But it's what would this young lady, would Trey, would all the other ones that have done it, the Skittles group, which I just saw their live performance. They were at some festival. I saw that, and I'll be 100% honest, I was blown away, because you never really know what you're going to get. Like when you say, hey, they're doing this, and you're like, I'll be 100, they're good. And so you've given these opportunities, not that they couldn't have got them. Maybe they could have, maybe they couldn't have, but we all know that we don't typically give that same power, that same privilege to people when they have these that's a hero. That's a hero that said, like, these people are no better, no worse. They're just like us. And when you see that, is they have a story, they have a mission. So then when I talk to dealers, is like, what are you doing in your community? What are you doing for that experience? Like, you want the business. Every dealer says they want business. I want to grow my business.
Yeah, you got to work for it now.
But it's also, what are you giving back to where people want to do business with you, which I think ties into the experience. That's why I really wanted to talk about your Dash Gordon thing, because I know that, listen, there's nothing you're going to do that I am not going to donate to, because I think it is one of the best causes I've seen in years. And I grew up with a very maladjusted childhood, in the sense of like women's shelters, homeless shelters, stuff like that. So I didn't have a disability, other than the fact that my mom made some really terrible choices. But when I see what you're doing, it's like, I want to be able to help anyone that you're influencing. Why? Because I think it's great. I think it's something that we need to do. And I think
it's been the best 2 years of my life.
And I think it's that. You talk about 2 years, you started something that you're like, hey, we're just going to kind of do something to make some money for vacation, that turns into a foundation. Like, and I want to circle back to what you said first, because guys, and I know we're going to give some disappointing news right now. Right, we're going to end this with kind of a disappointment. Is Tim said, right, that you have to have that drive to win, to power through, to be adversity, right? And if you don't have it, I'm not going to say it's impossible to teach, but I'll say it's very improbable to teach that drive. Like, but when you think about that, so he starts as doing an Uber driver, Dash, whatever they call it, and he's like, I just going to make some money for vacation so that we don't have to hit our savings account and everything else. Easy, bing, bang, boom. It's, the height of COVID, so it'll be easy because that's what everybody does. And I think it might've been 4 months, 3 months. This turns into, he did one kind of novice thing that then turns into the next. And then it was like moss on a log. It just starts rolling down the hill at full speed.
I door dashed for 5 weeks.
5. That's, I mean, and guys, and now he has won the coolest glasses ever. Okay. Like these are the coolest glasses ever, but he's got the persona, he's got the audience, he created this foundation, he's giving back on top of doing a full-time job, right? That's drive. But it's because he's passionate about it. It matters. He cares, right? So I challenge everybody as they watch this. One, okay, when this comes out, I don't want to spoil it for Tim because he said he's not going to blush on this. But when this comes out, so at the very end of this video, I'm going to end with something that's really going to probably make him blush. But I want you guys to check out Dash Gordon. The second thing that I want you guys to do is I want you to think about if you're dealers and you're watching this, or you're not a dealer and you're just in the industry. You don't have that influence, but you're in it. What are you doing to create that experience for your store? What are you giving back? Right? And what are you doing when it comes, and we specifically talk about used cars, but just the business in general, is what are you doing to ensure that customers want to do business with you? What's the connection you're creating? Are you creating a connection that people say, man, I want to do it, or not? Now, as we wrap up, I'm about to hit the intro out, but I wanted to let Tim know he's got some events coming up, and I'm actually going to be down in Houston, which is his hometown, down for Thanksgiving. And when I'm at Houston, when I walk to Tim and we either go to lunch or dinner, I will also be handing him a donation for $5,000 to his foundation to help him out with everything else he's doing. So like I told him that he might be blown away. He told me he would not obviously blush or be surprised.
Wow.
This is on a podcast, right? So I can't not do it. I just said it on live video. But this is how much I believe in Tim. It wouldn't matter if he was selling tchotchkes to people. I don't care. I believe in Tim and what he's doing, and obviously want to make sure he can still do that. So Tim, when I see you, whether it's the 27th or 28th, buddy, you'll be getting that from me. And I appreciate you coming on. We're going to drop out of this now. We appreciate you guys being with us. And hey, guys, we just took it to the streets and kind of dropped the mic onto the experience, the connection, and the community. We thank you guys and appreciate you listening.